marketplace. This is the Richard Carr Motors Baylor Bear Hotline. We're joined by Grayson Grundhoefer, 365 Sports Football Analyst. Grayson, we were at Media Days, as you know, on Wednesday, and unfortunately we weren't able to play the Aranda interview, but all of it is on transcript, and Craig put up the quote when he was so honest about the little bit of a nice recruiting run we're paying players. What was your reaction when you saw that?
I think it was just, well, first of all, Craig, obviously, with the tweet that blew up and went completely viral was awesome to see. And I know we were having conversations about it on the other, Colt and I, and just kind of thinking about, not just that he was honest about that, but also just, I think it's been more than just the words, right? We've seen it with action. I mean, the fact that they went out and got a guy like Kamarian Morgan, winning a battle over A&M, winning a battle over SMU, and all his other offers, that you could mention. I mean, that was kind of a sign, right? And what they did in their transfer portal was also a sign of this. But I like how open and honest he was about it, because obviously, as we saw last year, he didn't really lean in to NIL. He didn't really lean into the transfer portal fully. And now I think this offseason, there's been a complete shift, and it was a needed one. It was one that was going to have to happen if Baylor was going to have success under Dave Aranda, and I think he saw that. And it's a welcome change. It's something that absolutely needed to happen, and I appreciate Dave Aranda for being very honest about that, because it absolutely is the thing that has changed. NIL and transfer portal are absolutely the things that have changed Baylor's recruiting, and I think you're going to see it with the talent that they have on the field next year from the transfer portal and the quality of their recruiting class this year.
Grayson, one of the other big changes is he's going to be calling the defensive plays, and that's the thing that stuck out to me most. Sans the "we're paying players" comment, was his approach is completely different than it's been the entire time he's been here. What do you make of that, and how it might affect other realms of the team, but also the importance of having somebody on offense like Jake Spavital, who's been a head coach before too?
Definitely. And I think the thing that, really when I took a step back and kind of listened to all of his interviews and, everyone talking to him, and what kind of was the root of what he was saying about that specific thing, Paul. And the thing that he kept bringing up was just this philosophy of getting back to ball. And I think he said the word ball so many times, and just in reference to, how he's going to handle his day to day, right? Sacrificing time, with family, or sacrificing time on relationships, and focusing all in on watching game tape from this game or this team, or really just diving back into the full-on game planning and getting better as a football mind, and making sure that, he's up to date on all the trends that are going around in college football, to make sure that he can put together the best defensive scheme possible. And he mentioned that a few times. He went and brought up his time at Wisconsin, where he felt like he was a machine at that point. And I think he's trying to get back to that point where, it is all about the football. And Baylor needed that. I think Dave Aranda needed that, because I think over the last couple of years, we maybe saw some flaws maybe in him as a head coach. And I think he saw those flaws as well, and just kind of getting back to the thing that he's great at, right? Which is X's and O's, coaching defense. I think is a welcome change for Baylor, and something that Dave Aranda needed, and I think the Baylor program needed. So, that philosophy of back to ball was definitely something that stuck out to me.
Grayson, we got the official word that Kurt Daneker, who was a big transfer offensive line pickup earlier in the offseason, has officially retired, tearing his ACL, and that ends his college career and ends his Baylor career before it ever really got started. I know that you and Colt had kind of been dropping clues here and there that there was some attrition like this that could be on the horizon. They went and got Colin Truitt just a few weeks ago, which appears to have been the answer to the Daneker piece, or just the offensive line piece in general. But your thoughts on where they find themselves? Is that I guess you already kind of knew this was coming, but was just your thoughts on Daneker's abrupt stint here and how Truitt fills in that hole?
Right. So, I did know that this was coming, and it kind of been something lingering for a while. He missed pretty much all of spring football. He played some at the very beginning and then at the very end, but in general, he was just never fully healthy. And I think it just kept being a situation where he could never get back 100%, right? And so at the end of the day, he had to make this decision. Baylor's known about it for a long time. And so obviously they addressed it by adding Colin Truitt, the Chattanooga offensive lineman, in June. And so that's how they tried to solve it. Right now, I think they've also done that with their other additions with Omar Igbedian, Colton Thomason, and Sidney Fugar. So they've really done a nice job in the transfer portal. But Daneker was expected to be a big-time player for them. 6'4", 332 pounds. And the unfortunate part here is, he played over 800 snaps and played in all 12 games last year for Ohio. And then he comes to Baylor and gets hurt, the very beginning of spring football. And so it's not really something that I feel like they could have, planned on. But I do know that after he did get injured, they had to, go back into the portal and try to figure out a way to make sure the offensive line didn't fall apart because of it. And I think adding Truitt will definitely, bring it closer to where they need to be. But I'd be lying if I said Daneker wasn't a pretty big loss. He was a very different type of prospect from a physicality and size standpoint, that's for sure. Truitt more technician. So we're going to have to kind of see how they kind of move things around. If maybe they move a guy like Colton Thomason to guard to try to make up for some of these things. We'll see. That's something we'll probably know in the fall. But it is a significant loss for Baylor. But the good news is they have tried to address it already.
So they did get Morgan out of South Oak Cliff, and you've been all over that and interviewed him and all that and what that could mean because of a very highly rated player. And they've been on this heater, so to speak. So Taz Williams from Red Oak, the wide receiver, has a list from everybody known to man. I saw a note where somebody put up a tweet, they sent it to me, where it had 3 or 4 schools, I think A&M, et cetera, Penn State, but that Baylor, I think, is very heavily involved in this decision. Are they still, at least in your opinion, in a position to be able to get what would be a tremendous pickup from him?
Right. I saw that tweet as well. Baylor is definitely involved in that recruitment. I actually think the list is pretty off. If I was kind of looking at it, it would be SMU, Penn State, and Baylor.
Okay.
Those would kind of be the 3 schools that I would be looking at, specifically Penn State. I think Penn State is probably the biggest competition for Baylor in landing him. I think that, this has been one of those situations that has happened really quickly, right? So you've kind of seen him kind of pick up steam over the last week because his best friend gave his pledge to the Bears. Once that happened, he got back in contact with the Baylor staff, and things have kind of trended in Baylor's direction since then. And I know Penn State has gotten a little nervous about it. I think other people are kind of starting to take notice of it as well, that Baylor really got themselves back in that race for, a 4-star prospect, the top, 300 player in the country, a guy with 50 offers. It's pretty crazy how Baylor is able to flip the script on him so quickly after the Kamari and Morgan decision. So, yes, Baylor is in it. I think that if I were kind of betting on it right now, I think it'll be Penn State or Baylor. And I really am torn. I'm probably 50-50 on it at this point. I think we'll know more heading into tomorrow when he decides. But the biggest thing here is things have happened so quickly, right, for Baylor. So they've had to make up a lot of ground in less than a week. And so I think the biggest thing is just I reported this week that he's going to take a visit at the end of July, and he set that before making this decision. So it's really going to come down to, is he really going to commit somewhere and then take a visit to Baylor, or was that more of a sign of, maybe his intention on what he's going to do with this decision? We'll see. It's going to happen tomorrow at 4 p.m. And like I said, I'm pretty split between Baylor and Penn State.
And looking around, it looks like all the other industry sites are as well, Grayson. There's nobody that's like, oh yeah, he's going here. It's all kind of very murky. So yeah, that's actually a recruitment that is very, very interesting. And man, what a huge win that would be for Baylor. You mentioned that you listened to all of Aranda's various interviews from around Media Day. The players were obviously doing their thing as well. What I guess did you gather that we haven't touched on, or what was of most interest to you from just hearing Aranda and company do their thing in Vegas?
I think one of the biggest things was just this idea of, I think it was mentioned multiple times, but guys turning from puppies into dogs. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have an article on that next week, but almost every person that y'all talk to, I feel like as far as players go, we're talking about this mentality of, getting back to competition, getting back to physicality, having the hunger to win, having the drive to push others, right? To push them to get better. I think there was a lot of complacency last year, and I'm not really sure why that was. They weren't great in 2022, but I think it was kind of probably lingering from what happened at the end of 2022, and it kind of just trickled over into 2023. And so it was kind of complacency by older guys, and then you had a lot of younger guys who weren't ready, right? They were still, young guys. And so now I think it's all about, the entire team just becoming dogs. As these guys have mentioned it, as guys have talked about, just this change of mindset, these transfers that they've brought in, bringing in a different mindset, a different level of physicality, and then older guys stepping up in their roles and younger guys really trying to take starting roles, come in and immediately take a starting role because they saw Caden Jenkins and Carl Williams do that a year ago. So I think that was kind of the other big thing that stood out to me, just that idea of kind of getting back to that physicality and competition. I think that was mentioned heavily and something that honestly is very, very important for this program to get back.
Yeah, that's one of the things I came out of that as well. Is that he said that quite a bit as far as there is competition at certain places. Thank goodness, because they need that. One last thing, I asked him about whether or not he knew who his starting quarterback was, although they had not announced it like they did a couple of years ago with Shapen and Gary Bohannon. And so he said it's a fall competition. Do you believe that?
I do believe it. I do believe that it's a fall competition. I do believe that, they're going to give both these guys a shot. Do I also believe that Daquan Finn is going to be the starting quarterback at the end of the day? Yes, I do. I think that there's just something different that I believe he brings to the table. I feel like during Big 12 Media Days, a lot of the things that Dave Aranda said that they needed in a quarterback, I feel like Daquan Finn answers those. Whether it's turning a negative play into a positive play, whether it's, making plays with your feet, whether it's putting your team in really good situations, making plays when they aren't there. That's something that Daquan Finn does a really good job of. And I think based on what Dave Aranda said, it seems like it took Daquan Finn a little bit early on. And then towards the end, he kind of got going and really embraced the team, embraced Baylor, the culture at Baylor, what he needed to do at Baylor as far as a student athlete instead of just an athlete. Dave said they probably needed 2 more weeks. And in my eyes, him saying they needed 2 more weeks was kind of one of those things where it made my ears kind of perk up and go, well, it seems like, Finn was trending in that direction. And then if he had 2 more weeks, maybe he got to that point. So that's kind of me reading the tea leaves. But everything that I've heard or that I heard at Big 12 Media Days kind of continues to point me in the direction that Daquan Finn will be the starting quarterback. But I will also recognize that Sora Robertson has improved greatly, and in this scheme, he certainly seems to fit a lot better. And he's a guy who I think is definitely in Baylor's future plans as well.
Every team needs another one because, and I think that they wouldn't miss much of a beat, maybe slightly different styles. You hope that Quinn stays healthy and Sawyer stays healthy, whoever the starter is, because just look at around college football, it's an attritional thing too. Thanks for your time, Grayson. Have a great weekend. Great stuff on the Kamarian Morgan story, among others, as Baylor has been on a pretty good run. And as Dave Aranda told Craig, because we're paying players. And